Hello, welcome to a fresh episode of Mocca with Moiz. In this episode, we talk to Alizeh Atif, who is a college and career counselor at Be Guided. We talk about college applications, choosing the right career, and lots more. Alizeh, what's up?
Not much. Just had a great intro chat with you, which I guess is not on record.
Not on record.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be on record.
No, for the safety of this nation.
For the safety of and us as well.
Yes, for sure.
We know that there's a lot that we're looking forward to in the next 2 weeks, so we won't want to, ruin your plans.
Yes, inshallah. That is something I will not talk about in this episode.
Not in this episode.
I'm scared of Nazar.
Yeah. So before we move forward, you grew up in Karachi, then went to Turkey for your undergrad. How was that experience? Because Pakistanis also have this obsession with Turkey. We like going to Turkey for vacations. We like Turkish dramas. How was your experience over there?
So interestingly, the year I went was when the fervor with Turkey had only started because Behlul had just entered and Urdu one had just entered. So everyone thought that if you go there, they'll speak in Urdu and, it'll be like Pakistan. But I went there with that idea and I realized that Turkey is a more beautiful country than you'd imagine, but language barrier is a big reality. So I went there for my undergrad in international relations. And for the first year, I was just trying to grapple the situation with the language because even people over there in classes spoke Turkish. The professor would speak in English, but only for a short time. So it was a great country, but a country where I had to pick up the language. And then it became like home. So I studied IR. First 2 years were pretty difficult because of language. But the last 2 years were amazing. It's a very unique country.
And how long were you there? 4 years?
4 years.
Okay. And then you went straight away for your master's to England.
To Imperial.
To Imperial in England. Yeah. And how was that experience?
Imperial was lovely. It was a business school. So in my undergrad, it was IR, social sciences. But I switched to marketing. And interestingly enough, a lot of people then say, how did that transition happen, right? So I had gone for an exchange program as part of my undergrad. Sabanchi used to offer that. So I went to Nottingham. And over there, I took a business school elective, very randomly, a marketing one. When I took it there, I realized I didn't take marketing earlier because I didn't know about marketing, but I loved it. So I took a leap. It was a big leap. I remember that those 3 months I had between while I was studying and I decided to make that transition. But I just said, I know I've taken a couple of courses and I did an internship in marketing to be sure. So I went for my master's and the business school was very different. A lot of presentations, a lot of corporate dressing, a lot of focusing on relationship management, making good decks, having a good elevator pitch, all new things. Yeah. But it was varied, it was diverse, but alhamdulillah.
And you also worked at Barclays Bank after that for a brief period, right?
During my master's, I worked there for them for a project for intermediary marketing. And it was in Canary Wharf. So it was just the London dream. And, nice dressing, nice people, great exposure. It was great, but I knew one thing, the corporate life, and I still don't know why, but I knew it's not for me.
Yeah.
So I came back to Pakistan.
And I think most people who go outside Pakistan for their undergrad or their postgrad, there's a fundamental question that they encounter at the end of it that, do you want to come back to Pakistan? And you were having this conversation before we started recording as well. Was that a difficult choice for you?
When I was leaving, I think I was maybe 15 or 16. So interestingly enough, I think I was one of the first few people in KGS to ever go to Turkey. So I had no people in my school to ask how Turkey was, which is why I think I was so surprised. And one of the few people I knew, interestingly, was Akash Dharma from Lyceum. He was the head boy and he had gone to Turkey. So anyways, I went there and I didn't know what to expect. So all I knew was I'm going to a new place and it'll be super cool. It was, but I think when time passed and when we really grow as individuals when we're far away from home, you learn how to live on a budget, make food, do your laundry, and really emotionally take care of yourselves independently. I realized there was a big void in my life, right? If I was in Istanbul, if I was in London, I had great independence, exposure, but there was a big void, and that was my parents and my family. And knowing that, I just want to be physically close to them. We always WhatsApp video calling, but there was a big void. So with time, I realized what's missing is back home. So I came back.
Yeah. And when you came back to Pakistan, you didn't choose a corporate career. You went to a school, a private school in Karachi, and you worked as a college counselor over there, right?
Yeah, it was very, very... I remember I moved back and within the first week, I started looking for jobs and everyone suggested otherwise. They said, you've come back after 5 years, take a breather. But I think I still don't know how to take one. So I started hopping onto job interviews. I went to the natural progression of marketing agencies, creative agencies, multinationals. And again, it just didn't sit well. And I don't know what it was, but the environment or the energy. And then randomly, my friend, she was working at a high school and she was a teacher over there. So she said, I can get you an interview if you'd like, right? They're looking. And I went there, and even the person interviewing me, who was the head of counseling, said, you've done your master's in marketing. The role is for college counseling. We can make it college and careers counseling. So can you tell me, like, what would you like to do? And I said, I think there's a fit because I've been taught how to market products and services, and I could market universities to students and students to universities.
Yeah.
I think we can give it a shot.
At its core, most college applications are you marketing yourself to a group of people.
But I didn't realize that
Yeah.
then. Honestly, in retrospect, or in hindsight, I feel very confident positioning it that. But at that point,
Yeah.
it was something very intangible. It was students running, sunlight, walking upstairs, which I remembered walking up as a high school student. And I remembered it feeling happy. So I went with it.
Yeah.
And it was a great year of my life. A really good experience of moving back and being around students and parents.
And now you have your own thing. You have.
Yeah.
You work at Be Guided.
Be Guided Now.
Be Guided Now. So the first question I think that I've often thought about is that in Pakistan we see, I won't say a trend, but this proclivity amongst certain people that if we see someone do well in a certain profession, you want to opt for the same profession. So if I see you do well as a college counselor, I would want to join the same profession without thinking if it's a good fit for me. Or if I have the kind of skills that would require to excel in that, right? So for people, especially young people, 14, 15, 16, in their O-levels, A-levels, or those applying for an undergrad degree, what would you say? What are certain factors that you think you would want to consider before choosing a career?
Very good question. And I think a lot of the answer was the way you started saying there has to be a certain fit in your skill sets. And just adding to that, before you know what career works for you, I don't think it's something A, we're taught, or B, we look into, is we don't spend time, effort, or have the tools to get to know ourselves better. Now, whether that be our personality type, our interests, who we are, what we like, when we like doing something, or what environment, right? So I think the first most important thing, generally speaking, is self-awareness, right? So having gotten that out of the way, if you're looking for a career, always speak to someone who's in that career right now. So ask a professional in that field, what does a day in your life look like, right? That's probably the best way. And that's the most human way. So speak to someone. And nowadays over Zoom, right? It's quite possible you can do that. The second thing you must do is you must see in that career, in the country or the city you'd like to work in or you are, what are companies that are doing well? Then maybe go on their website, look at job descriptions. Now, those usually have a lot of skills outlined, right? These are the things you must have. Then ask yourself honestly, do you see yourself having that? Would you see yourself having that in the future, right? So, and the last thing you should do is when choosing a career is maybe doing an internship in that field. Again, get really close to that natural position of what it'll look like, and no one's going to get it right the first couple of times. So be ready for that too.
And I think the one question I get asked a lot is that how to write a personal statement or how to write a college application. And people think as if it's just a simple essay that you can one day start writing. It's an application is about what you've been throughout your life, right? And if, for example, if I'm as a student applying to a college, I would first look at the kind of application they want and then perhaps craft my profile so that my application reflects the work that I've done so far. So if I'm applying for a degree right now, like, is this the best time to come to you? So for people, prospective applicants, when do you think is the best time for them to come to Be Guided Now?
The best time if you're applying for your undergrad, right? So is the best time is to come in AS. So 1 year before you apply. For your masters, I think 9 months before the deadline, or even I would say 6 months is okay. Ideally 9 months. But for your undergrad, at least a year before, if not more. And the reason is because, see, I can help you in improving the positioning or helping you improve the framing of it. But whatever matter you've done, right, that is something that will take time. Because if you try to do things in organic manner where this university wants these 3 activities, so over the next 2-week holiday you're going to do all of it, it'll come across as very inauthentic. And admission officers are experts,
because they handle so many applications every year.
They know it, right? So ideally, if someone wants to aim high, and that even with scholarships, if you're applying abroad for your undergrad, come to me in maybe AS, at the start of AS. And generally speaking, I think timing is the thing that I don't know why, but we find it very hard to understand why must we go early. Even parents find it a bit hard to understand. But I think that's because college counseling or career counseling for that matter is relatively new as an industry that's meshing in.
Yeah.
So its value is being understood quite rapidly, but we're still in that very nascent state in the hype cycle of it being seen as an industry. I think that's the reason.
Also, speaking of parents, the one thing that I've seen is that parents often, I think, applying to any college or applying for any post-grad program is an extremely difficult time because you're anxious, you have deadlines, you have a lot of information that you're processing. So I think parents also have an extremely important role. Parents, your friends if you're a little older, because they can make the process really easier for you, but they can also add to your anxiety. So any advice you have for parents whose children are applying to colleges or universities?
I think parents are one of the most important stakeholders, and I would even go as far as to say they're more important than the students, because for the students, we're aware they're really important. But for parents, because it's not realized, it's even more important that we make them a part of it at all levels, right? And the one thing I'll talk about at this point is finances, right? The one thing is Pakistanis looking at our exchange rate, we don't know when parents give a go-ahead to students to applying abroad to US, UK, Canada, Malaysia, Turkey. At that point, parents should know roughly what the total cost of attendance for that region is and if it's feasible for them. Because if it's not, unfortunately, the few schools that we do tend to go to, it becomes a social tag or peer pressure that if you don't apply to the US, UK, Canada, you must be off. Unfortunately, that's how it is. The way it's almost like you're not good enough, right? So there's also that peer pressure the student is facing at a very young age when they're anyway going through puberty, and it's a very big change. So parents should maybe speak to the counselor ahead of time, understand their own personal finances, cost of attendance, and then have an informed, timely decision with their child. And even that conversation is a delicate one, because sometimes we grew up thinking we're part of a certain social circle, but that amount is so big, right? I think of going to college is second to buying a house or getting your kids married, right? It's a really big amount. So it's a very delicate time for the relationship between the parent and a child, and then comes a counselor and the teacher and the admission officer. It's quite hybrid, very complex. So parents' anxieties are bound to be also quite heightened. So maybe work with an expert, or at least go for an intro consultation session to know what your options are. But the key word here is ahead of time.
And the one thing that's also important, I think this question, I get this question asked a lot. I'm sure you do as well. So you said that you went for your master's straight after your undergrad. I think people who are going for the master's have this question that, do they go for their master's right after the undergrad, or do they work for a couple of years? I worked for a year and a half before I went. You went there right after your undergrad. Where do you stand now? Do you think it was the right decision, or do you think it would have been better to perhaps work for a few years before you went?
Again, it totally depends on how happy were you and how confident and comfortable were you with what you studied. If you were very happy, very comfortable, very confident, right, then there's no reason to wait. But of course, apply for programs where there's no work experience requirement. That's
because
really
some programs, especially in the US, have that requirement.
MBA programs and a lot of business school programs do. So keep that in mind. But assuming there's no real requirement from the university side, if you have studied something, I studied IR because I was sure I was going to be the foreign minister of Pakistan, right? And I wanted to be the first female one, but Hina Rabbani Kar became that. I didn't want to be the second, so I gave up my political career. But I knew that what I studied could not be my career. It was an interest. So there was a realization. So I said, okay, I don't want to carry on with what I've studied, so might as well make the transition, move on, figure it out. But if someone knows they like what they're doing, then actually they don't need to immediately do their master's, then get work experience, right? Figure out in that industry or that career, maybe you like a niche. So maybe in law, you wanted to go into arbitration, but maybe some people wanted to go into litigation, right? So it really, there's no one size fits all, but learn the tools or the words to assess your situation. There's no right or wrong, but know if you're happy or you're not, if you want to change or not, and then decide.
And as you said, you initially said that know more about the field you're applying in. So now there are so many, if you're applying for a niche, especially because most undergrad programs are very general in some sense.
Super general.
So if you're applying for a specialized program, it's perhaps better to understand how the industry works, right?
Because what we study in the classroom versus the daily career, it's quite different, right? The skill sets. So even if you don't want to do a job, maybe do an internship to be fully sure. Just, explore it further and then make the right choice. Because for most people, master's is the last degree you get. So you might as well make it the right choice for you.
Also, the one question I've often had is that we see that in Pakistan because people, when you're choosing a career, especially because, you choose your subjects, and in O-level, when you're very young, you're going through a lot in life generally. And most schools I've noticed, even the good schools, they don't really have a dedicated academic counseling program. And even the ones who do, it looks like academic counseling is at the back burner. It's not really, their top priority. So because you worked at a high school as well, do you think there's been a change in Pakistan in the last few years? And even because you worked at a school that's a specialized A-level school, right? Which is slightly different. Because by then, most people have still chosen their subjects. They've chosen their O-level subjects. They've chosen their A-level subjects. So have you noticed a difference in the past few years? Do you think it's improving?
I think it's improving phenomenally. There's a great awareness matched by action also.
Okay.
And they are hiring top talent when it comes to crafting these departments and making sure they're executing with their, sticking true
We know
to
about them hiring
values.
top talent. That's evident.
Oh, thank you so much. I was speaking at a more senior strategic level. So the thing is that I think it's phenomenal. Having said that, as you said, somehow it does go back to the back burner. When you have college deadlines, they seem more crucial. Or if it's O levels, A levels, right? Then it seems like getting good grades. But academic counseling is altogether a different ball game, and actually the right time to start academic counseling from the students, parents, and from the admin side, where it's a priority for them, is actually, I would say, as early as 6th grade. That's where the foundation is formed of if you are a math student, a science student, a social science student, an art student, or an athletics or a music student. So I don't think we're there yet. We will, I think, to get there faster, have to start from an earlier age and give that time. But to anyone watching, again, admin, educators, parents, students, give more importance to these conversations as early as 6th grade. And maybe in the next 10 years, we'll see the fruits of that.
Yeah. And I think there's also a larger debate or a larger conversation that we need to have about how we perhaps, I wouldn't say ostracize, but perhaps marginalize certain students who want to opt for certain professions. So you said athletics, right? So if in most schools, I can't imagine a student being given the right to, for example, choose athletics in grade 6, right?
We don't even have athletics. Do we?
No, I don't think so.
We don't.
Or,
It's narrow.
perhaps there could be a person who's not into math or into art or into anything, but he might be a good musician, right? So,
or a good chef.
Yeah. So there's perhaps also need to cultivate these professions as well, or these, fields as well, so that a student can choose that, I don't want to opt for any of these. I want to opt for social sciences or, cooking or anything else. There's perhaps also a larger conversation that we need to have about all these other professions
Yes,
as well.
exactly. At a more policy level, right?
Yeah.
Where does the funding from it come from? Do they actually start running? Because if you look at the concept of, when I was learning more about this profession, I tried to read up on what are the basics. So the one thing was the multiple intelligence theory. And that was that we think, unfortunately, and not just in Pakistan, generally across the world, that intelligence is based on your grades.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the conversation used to be in a very quantitative manner. How many O's did you have in your A levels or O levels? Which I think is a highly toxic question. But if we think like that, then anyone who's not good in academics, but does give, I do tell students, do give it your 100%. I'm not saying don't study. But let's say someone's extremely good at arts, right? Painting or running or dancing or acting. Unfortunately, they will never in our academic framework be given that kind of importance or respect or value to that kind of intelligence. And in the multiple intelligence, all the things I said are artistic, culinary, athletic, and they were meant linguistic, being able to learn language. Those are all equal intelligences, with academic just one of the 7. But again, that's a much more complex debate to have.
Yeah. And you spoke about the exchange rate, Abhi. And the question that, people often perhaps ask you as well is that with the exchange rate depreciating, with the rupee depreciating, the cost of a foreign education has also increased exponentially.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was applying for universities, the dollar was 118. And by the time I went for my master's, the dollar was 160. So it's also difficult for people to estimate the cost of their education. So what would you say about scholarships? Like, are there scholarships that are available, or can you also craft your application in a certain way to apply for certain scholarships? And if people are applying for certain scholarships, then also does the timeline change? Should they perhaps approach you even before a year? So
So I'll start with answering the last part. Exactly. If you're applying for any scholarship, it literally doubles, if not triples, your work. So the time frame goes back. So if you want to apply for a good scholarship, which is, let's say, 60% or above of the total cost, then keep at least, if it was 1 year, keep 2 years. If it was 6 months, keep 12 months. There are scholarships in the US for undergrad and masters, but be aware of the difference between financial aid and scholarships.
Yeah.
That's different. So look into that. Secondly, know that scholarships would require a greater quality of application because there's so much more competition. And the UK doesn't give too much. They give very small bursaries, but that's very small amount compared to the total cost. Turkey has great scholarships, but for Turkey in the US, focus on your SAT for your undergrad and your GRE and GMAT for your masters. Those really bump up your scholarship chances.
Okay. And for people who are applying for scholarships like Fulbright, do you guys also help with that?
We help with Chevening and Fulbright support for their CVs, interview preparation, and their university essay editing.
Yeah.
So we don't work end-to-end for that, but we do offer support for that. And again, for that, the one thing that's really important for both of these scholarships is, other than your grades, there has to be some level of genuine interest and consistent effort to doing something for your community in a very authentic manner. It doesn't have to be that you're the head or president of a club society. It could be done on an individual level, but you really have to show that you have something going other than your academics, where you're a community leader, there's empathy, responsibility, and action.
Yeah. And the one thing that I've also noticed is that there are people who, for example, have great applications, but don't do as well in the interviews. So how important is the interview as compared to the rest of the application?
It varies. In the US, if you're applying for your undergrad, the purpose of the interview is just to check the legitimacy, that if you were the person who really wrote the application. The interview for Oxford, Cambridge in the undergrad is very important. It makes or breaks. So it really depends on the region and if it's undergrad or masters. But generally speaking, the skill set you need for writing a good personal statement is often very different from being a good interviewee, sorry.
Yeah.
Again, practice mock interviews, get feedback, work with an expert. They have access to resources, past questions, and they give you personalized feedback, not just in terms of the content, but your body language, your delivery, your tonality. So really invest in this process, and you don't need to work with a college counselor per se. You could ask support from people who are older than you in your batches. But work with someone who can give you personalized feedback.
Yeah. And the last question, and I think this is very important because, as you said, there's this notion that if you don't go to the US or the UK or perhaps Turkey for your education, you're not good enough. And in the society that we live, not everyone can afford to go. Not everyone can get a scholarship. Not everyone can afford to go to the US or the UK. We spoke about rupee depreciation.
Yeah.
So would you like to say something to people who are good but who can't afford to go out and who are applying to places like IBA, for example, that aren't too expensive, that are more affordable? So any words for them that, it's because there are some places in Pakistan, places like IB, for example, that may be as good as a college or a business school in the US. So any words for them?
For sure. I think it's really a notion that we're all trying to break away inch by inch, and it's going to take time, where we feel Pakistani education is equally good. But it's very natural to feel that way, right? I can't not validate that. But one thing is, students from IBA, right, LUMS, GIK, NUST, all of them, if you're doing your undergrad from here and you can maintain a good GPA, get 2 to 3 years of good work experience, have good relationships with your colleagues, and do something for the community, I see no reason why the Chevening Scholarship or the Fulbright Scholarship, or there's also a Commonwealth Scholarship and the World Bank Scholarship, right? There's no reason why you shouldn't have a good shot at these.
Yeah.
But you'll have to, and of course, take your GRE and GMAT to increase your chances. It will be possible for you to go, and probably on a scholarship. But if you feel you've wanted to go, you've not been able to go, and you would still like to work towards it, have a 3-year strategy, stick to it, and make the most of every experience and opportunity you have over here, whether it's networking, interview call with admission officers over Zoom, build that connection digitally. And I see no reason why they wouldn't have a good shot. It'll just take longer, but they'll get there too. Yeah.
And in terms of logistics, just before we part, if somebody's outside Karachi, can they reach out to you guys and have interviews and appointments over Zoom?
So actually, the entire last year and a half, I've been operating completely digitally. So now I have international clients and national clients. I am planning on, inshallah, going back to in-person counseling, but digital counseling will still be an option.
Yeah.
So anywhere in the world, I do have international clients, and they can reach out to me on the Instagram or Facebook page, and they'll be directed to how to book a session.
Okay. Thank you for your time, Alizeh.
Thank you, Moiz. It was really nice.
It was nice having you as well.
Likewise.
So we spoke about college and career counseling. We spoke about scholarships. We spoke about how schools also need to invest more in counseling. Until next time, keep watching.